Simon Sinek states leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. Today we're going to discuss leadership and empathy. What is your shared purpose and caring in the workplace, and why allyship matters more than ever. And to help me do this, I'm very happy to welcome back Christina Herrera. Christina, how are you doing? Great to have you back this week.
It's great to be back.
And here's hoping that everyone gets to hear both of us. So it feels like a conversation rather than a monologue from you and me just miming along, you know. Although some did say that it was my best performance, so I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or whether to do whatever. But it's hopefully people can hear us, and but yeah, it's great to have you back, and it's great to get to connect you on some of these things that there's two of these articles that you provided, and really want to dig into sort of some of your key thoughts into some of the content. Before we get into that, but if this is your first time coming across the channel, thank you for joining. Thank you for spending some time with us. Hopefully, we provide some value to you. If there are questions that you have, please do let us know, and we will try and get to them as part of the stream. And if there is first time, just subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell so you're alerted. We're here Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. Eastern, each weekday. So before further ado, Christina, empathy, leadership, Sinus Sinek, you present it. And I don't know about you, I sort of, I take all his content. I watch most of his interviews. His ability to communicate and really cut through so many things. And that sort of statement, leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. It just really changes the mental flip in people's approach to leadership, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the really interesting part is, often you're not taught how to be a leader. Some people are just really, really naturally good at being leaders, right? Other people, when they get promoted, they might sit a leadership course through their jobs and all of that, and that's fantastic. If you have access to that type of training, that's great. But often we are put in these situations where we can stand up and really be that advocate for people and show those leadership qualities. And so one thing that Simon says that is interesting is that some people shouldn't be leaders, right? And I thought, oh, okay. And I think that's where he was kind of making that connection with empathy is if you lack empathy and you're unable to really put yourself in someone else's shoes to help them grow or to maximize their potential, then maybe leadership is not for you.
Yeah. It's definitely something I took away, and he gave a great example as well about the story he told about the individual who worked for a hotel chain, and another one who worked for a casino, and their emotional connection, and how one leadership style within an organization was very different to another. So in essence, it's individuals, yes, who perhaps shouldn't be leadership, but then he also talked about, well, maybe individuals need to be taught, because leadership is a skill you develop, and with practice you get better, but also that organizations need to sort of be pushing that as part of their culture. And the example he gave was very good, and how the individual felt completely released in one working environment compared to another.
Yeah, exactly. And I love when he says, leadership skills, it's like a muscle, right? You've got to exercise it and use it. And it just reminds me as well of Carol Dweck's book about growth mindset, right? And having or understanding that everyone has the capacity to learn, everyone has the capacity to grow. It just takes a little bit of effort. And like a muscle, you can get really, really great at leadership if you just practice. So yeah, that story that he tells in the YouTube video about Noah, it's Noah, who works at Starbucks, is a star employee, always taking care of customers and looking out for them, making sure they have their right order and all of that, versus the Noah who works at the hotel and just can't wait to leave. And it's the same person, but it's the different environments. So leaders play a huge role in creating this environment of success and this kind of environment of, as well, I mean, that psychological safety as well to get to success.
Yeah, he talked about creating a vulnerable environment, right? To what you just said, right? And it isn't a vulnerability where people are in tears and struggling. He graphically illustrates illustrates that point in the video. But he did talk about, people have the ability to put their hand up and says, I need some help, or I'm not entirely sure how to do this, or some other ways that people may sort of feel comfortable coming forward with information, or sort of feel they can talk with their manager, with their peers about some of the concerns that they may have, rather than well, you're doing something wrong, you need to fix it, or you may have to look for other employment. That's sort of two very distinct viewpoints. And one other thing he mentioned there was sort of, I think it's probably relevant to today's environment, in a sense of where a lot of employees are working in organizations. They feel relatively secure at the moment because their organizations have told them, we aren't going to be any layoffs. There aren't going to be, any sort of nothing to worry about just there. However, eventually, obviously, bottom line has to come into play. And he talks about the psychological effect of those shifts whenever the trust may be eroded, because he talked about leadership as being two things, trust and perspectives. And the perspectives have truly shifted, but then some of their actions that leadership may take can significantly change perspective between the employees and the leadership, and also their connection with the organization.
Yeah. One really interesting thing that he pointed out is there are certain theories and beliefs that we hold that can actually undermine someone with great leadership skills. So he mentioned, I wrote it down, I want to get it right. He mentioned shareholder supremacy, the theory of shareholder supremacy, and the fact that the business priority is to value our shareholders, right? To increase and maximize our shareholder value. And he likened that to a coach putting more value to his fans than his players and expecting to build a really great team. It's kind of theories like that and these kind of norms and things that we just expect are normal. Like, of course that the shareholder value is important, more important than anything else. That I think undermines great leadership. And that's also where we have an opportunity to kind of push the bounds and kind of shake the boat a little bit and say, well, hold on a minute, I'm holding this legacy assumption. Is it actually the right thing for this business and for my people?
So how do organizations start to change those things, right? Those mental shifts to create those opportunities for that leadership or mindset approach to actually change, to be that more empathetic and that have greater perspective?
I think, one thing that you and I were chatting about earlier was where you are focusing your attention, right? So if you're focusing your attention at the end game, like what I find is important is productivity, or what I find is important is shareholder value, then your perspective is always going to be off. But if you bring that perspective back and earlier into the process to say, well, what is that actually made of? What do people have to think, feel, and do so that can happen? Because that will happen if you take care of all of this process up front. I think the whole notion of having, the bigger picture actually sort of makes us lose sight sometimes of, there is a bigger picture. Of course there is. And it's important. But let's just really come down to, like, how are we going to get to that bigger picture? It's not all about this bigger picture. So one of the hacks that Simon gives in his video is around just having more conversations with your employees about your failures as a leader, right? Your mistakes as a leader, and bringing down that guard of like, oh, I can't tell them that I'm scared, or I can't tell them that I don't know what I'm doing, or that I made a mistake. Like, there's no need to fake it, because if you fake it, you're not really going to grow, right? Or it's going to take you much longer. You might be laid off by then. You know what I mean? So you might not have the opportunity to grow. Yeah. So, one of those hacks that he provides is we just need to have more people who are more leaders, who are there and who are willing to use those hacks and talk about their own failures and really humanize the workplace so that we can focus on what is really important, because productivity will happen, right? With motivated employees who know what they're doing, who are intrinsically invested in what they're doing because they understand and they feel like they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of interesting things you did mention there. I just want to sort of pull out a little bit. So it almost sounds like leaders need to be vulnerable in front of their employees, where sometimes that's really a challenge because you've got to be the voice of reason, direction, confidence. That's a very dangerous. Well, some people feel that's a very dangerous place to go because they don't want to show that, and sometimes it's their own vulnerability, to use
Yeah.
the same word twice, that actually stops them from doing that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even in what you just said, right, there's this legacy assumption that confidence means that you're just really great at stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
right? That you're there to shine. But really, is that confidence, or is
yeah.
that I guess it's partly of confidence, but also partly of faking it, right? So confidence can look like so much. It can look like someone who's, I've never done this before, but let me give it a go. Or, so I think there's a lot of assumptions, a lot of kind of filling the gap things that we do in our day to day, that we could probably, use some coaching to kind of help us identify that in our everyday lives.
And part of coaching is on the job coaching, right? And we're often taught fake it till you make it, which sort of kind of contradicts everything that we're just saying here, right? And I think, when we talk about vulnerability and we talk about faking it, I think we have to acknowledge that most people know when you're faking something. They can read between the lines, right? And you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we all have this like radar in us, and we just think like, yeah, this is not sitting right. Like there, yeah, I won't say it, but this is just not right. So yeah, I think you need to. I have some really great mentors that I reach out to because I'm super comfortable with saying that I don't know something, right?
Mm,
Even as a consultant, you need to be brave enough to say you don't know, but you're going to figure it out. So, that's where your network comes in. That's where research comes in. That's where, your mentors come in. And you just, have those conversations. The, I feel like there's definitely been a shift. There's an emphasis in like, oh, I am the solution creator instead of I am the problem solver. I love problems. Like, let me
mm,
help you solve this problem.
mm.
And then the shift needs to come back to let me help you solve this problem because that way it's a little bit more collaborative, participatory. We're both bringing our knowledge to the table. I don't need to come and bring this shiny solution to you, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we talk about empathy and perspective, right? And what we have to acknowledge that this video was a time prior to COVID. Do you think, given everyone you've spoken to and those that you interact with, do you think empathy and perspective has shifted from leadership within most organizations?
Um, I mean, in the state of the world that we find ourselves in, yes, I think it's placed more emphasis on what it means to be a good leader because you can lead
Mm,
from anywhere, right?
right.
Um, if you had to, you could lead through text message, right? Like if there's a will, there's a way. Um, but I do feel like there is always an opportunity to improve, always,
Mm-hmm.
100%. But with COVID in mind, ultimately to be a leader is just to be a really great human being, right? You're taking a really human-centered approach to this task, this job that you're doing, and you're thinking, okay, like let me put them first. Let me like set them up for success.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just whenever you talked about, that I you just trigger something that's on your website, and it's right in the very front of everything you have, right on your website. It's as the successful projects are human centered. I think that's the verbiage it is. I may have got it off a little bit, but I think in essence what you're trying to say is it has to be human centered. Whatever you want to achieve, it has to focus on the humans they're going to be
Yeah.
participating up, what it's going to be delivered for. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
there's been so much emphasis on the role of project management, and project management is absolutely required, but you completely lose touch because, you're ticking the boxes. Yes, we've done this milestone. Yes, we've got into here. Yes, the furniture was ordered. Yes, we've moved the things from here from A to B and all of that, and you just lose sight. There's this whole human side, this human element that contributes to success.
Mm.
And the way I talk about it to people is very different. So like if I was to speak to a CFO who is not too comfortable with the language of human-centered, change or human-centered approaches to success, I talk about people-dependent return on investment, right? So there are certain elements of the return of your investment, this project, that is very, very people-dependent. And then we can start the conversation.
Right, right.
Language, it's a big deal.
It is, it is, it is. And another big deal is shared purpose, right? And this week, you did put out a video on LinkedIn, and I've put up on the screen just for those who are watching what it was you posted and sort of the intent. But I kind of want to dig into this a little bit more from your perspective, because one, I'm just curious, what prompted you to sort of share this, or trigger this, or ask this question of your group on LinkedIn?
It was tough. Let me just put that out there first. It was really tough recording that video and watching myself, and I have a ton of bloopers. But one day I'd like to compile all of my bloopers, because I have tried to do this in the past and I just wasn't feeling, I just wasn't really confident with it. So the reason, after our conversation, I had a number of other conversations with people, especially in the last 2 weeks, about the value of belonging and what it means to belong. And when you think about belonging and you think about, the workplace, everyone's having this conversation around productivity. I think there's a really nice place where shared purpose lives, right? And when you have a team that understands why we're here, what my role is, but what my role is in the bigger picture, it just helps to boost and to motivate them, and to help them understand how they are contributing in the bigger picture. So the whole idea of shared purpose, to me, it's really important. The best teams understand their purpose as a team, their team within an organization. That's really what prompted it. I mean, I was reflecting back on when I was working with a whole bunch of teams in my career, and I thought, which teams did I love working with the most, and why? Mm-hmm. And I kept coming back to this whole idea of shared purpose. And the reason why I posted it is because I thought, no one should have to, I mean, maybe this is common knowledge for many people, and maybe it's not. Right. And I shouldn't make that assumption. And everyone should have an opportunity to have this conversation with their teams, especially now that we're all virtual.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one, thank you for posting. And I can acknowledge and appreciate what it takes to do that. It takes an awful lot to hit that post button on LinkedIn whenever you upload it. And I can appreciate the bloopers. Trust me, I can. And I actually like to do these interviews and like to go live, because I don't know why, if I try to pre-record stuff where I talk just myself, the amount of bloopers is just off the charts. But anyway, I thank you for asking the question. But when we talk about shared purpose, and you talk about belonging, from the context you were mentioning, does shared purpose start with individuals? So what's my shared purpose? What's my contribution? Be it for myself, for the team, for the organization? Does it start with that and then builds up from that point?
I mean, it does. When I used to come into organizations and work with teams, one of the things that I would say is I'd go around the room and I'd say, so tell me what you do while you're here. And some people would say, oh, I'm an accountant. Some people would say, I help the people here to I don't know, submit their service tickets, and I help them, and I try and make them feel comfortable with the system that we're using. And, sometimes I make friends and all of that. And I think that's where it really begins, is what is your motivation for being there? I mean, when we think as well about the next generation, and partly also my generation, when I'm looking at an organization that I want to work with or work for, it's not about a particular company, it's about the people. So I'm always saying, who do I want to work for? Who is that person? What do they care about? Are we aligned? Are we going to get along together? And if I can see my values reflected in that person, then I know already from the onset, we're going to get along really well. We're going to be really, really productive, and it's going to be a great session. So yes, individually, shared purpose. There is this individual step that you take where you understand your role. You feel like you belong. You understand what your role is before having that conversation with your team.
Yeah, no, that alignment is great, and thank you for articulating the approach to it. But I have to imagine that, if a manager sits down and just like sets up a meeting and just asks everybody in the room, "What's our shared purpose?" That's going to be quite a quiet conversation initially. So how do you promote or how do you prompt those things? Because you just noted, right, it's you sit in a room and you ask people to really think about it, but actually what you probably find is the person who asks the question answers the question first wishes they're going last, because by the time it's gone around the room it actually feels like, oh, okay, their whole answers really change, because then they're really understanding the perspective of what the question is and actually what's trying to be achieved. So I'm just curious, what guidance could you give to anybody who wanted to sort of orchestrate that within their team?
Yeah. So one of the other things we did in person was like writing it down on a post-it note, posting it up, and then everyone just goes and they pick a random one and they read it out, and it's just a nice sharing, storytelling activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's virtually, you can do that virtually as well.
Yeah.
So you could jump on a virtual tool such as you know, PollEV or AHA Slides, put the put the question up on the slide and get everyone to text in their answer anonymously,
Mm.
right? It does take a lot of like probing questions. That was one of the questions there. The other question that I like to ask as well is like, when do you feel like you're doing your best work? Like, what does that feel like, or what does that look like? And bit by bit, you kind of start to build this narrative that tells you more about how that person feels in their role, how they feel day to day, like when they feel the most successful. You start to learn as well who they reach out to when they need help, who they reach out to when they've got a great news, who they reach out to when they've made a mistake. And that is also very telling and can help us understand from a shared purpose standpoint, like who are our allies, right? Who are our helpers, who are our supporters, and why are we all here?
Yeah. So, I mean, and you did sort of just give it, but from a leadership perspective, a manager perspective, you have to gather that, you have to synthesize that, you then have to communicate that, and how do people are I guess managers have to be vulnerable to ask the question, employees need to be vulnerable to sort of give perspective, understanding that it's a no judgment thing. It's really trying to get to the bottom of what that purpose is. But how do
Yeah.
managers then synthesize then to communicate what the collective team shared purpose should be?
I find it easier always to have a third party in the room, right?
Mm.
Because sometimes, and I've experienced this too, when I'm a leader of a team, I sort of I read what people have written, and then I think, oh yeah, because of this particular situation. Like I
Right.
add my
Bias.
assumption on my bias on top of
Yeah.
that.
Right.
So it's good to have a third person in the room when you're synthesizing the information, someone who is not really in touch, who doesn't really know the team, and can help build that change narrative for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to end up with a change narrative that kind of speaks to, what, almost like this is your team culture. This is why we're here. This is our mojo, right? And this is how we're all helping each other. So you're creating this tribe, this community, but it is tough. Synthesizing all of that data is going to be tough. It's always going to be tough, but having a third party in the room is always helpful.
Yeah, no, I think it's great guidance, and I also think just to hear your team members talking about this topic actually does bring this bonding together, right? Whether people
Mhm.
agrees with everything, if it's done in the right manner, you can stimulate a lot of conversation, and stimulate a lot of conversations that maybe not happen in the room, but may happen outside the room where they happen offline. So I think it's a really good thing. And one thing you did mention, and sort of takes us to the next thing, was about building allies and the importance of allies in the workplace. And that brings us to the third article we want to talk about. So caring in the workplace, why allyship matters more than ever. And it sort of talks. The article is give a quick overview because there is a few questions I want to get to. But in essence, it talks about, why friendship matters, how friendships and connections matter in the workplace, how it brings people together, and teams brought together actually perform better, and then ultimately leads to enhanced productivity for the organization. So, it's human condition is one about belonging. You spoke about that earlier, and so then
Yeah.
people having that feeling of allies and feeling of that belonging allows them to feel that little bit more vulnerable and the ability to contribute a little bit more.
Yeah, it helps to create this safe space, not only where you are comfortable to give your feedback, but you're also receptive to receiving feedback,
Mm,
which is always tough. So if you don't have that relationship with your team members, it's going to be really tough when they come back and say, "Oh, I've reviewed that PowerPoint presentation or that article you wrote, and I really think you should have written this, or you could change this to that." It's very easy to get your back up in those situations if you don't have rapport, if you
mm.
don't know that it's coming from a good place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And whenever you think about coming from a good place, it's like I also look back as well. So in the teams that sort of like you just did, right? What is the groups and where are the places that actually you find that allies and you find that team spirit? And I don't know about you, but my experience has always been the projects that I had to work on that were the hardest, and I had to
Mm.
give the most, and the ones I had to rely on other people as well to give their best. And I look back years ago of various projects that I've worked on, and those people, whenever we talk, we may not talk for a year at a time, but the moment we get on, we talk about that one project and we talked about what we
Yeah.
had to go through, you know?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. One of the most difficult projects I've ever been on, this is when I was in Australia, is the one where I've got the strongest bonds, right? And it also took a lot more work to build rapport. And also, I was coming in and I was the change manager, and there was a lot going on, a lot of, reactions and a lot of feelings around what was going on. And so it was definitely the most complex project I have ever been on and the most challenging. But man, I've made friends for life.
Right, right, and just those social connections and the reliance you have to have on each other, it just brings that bond. So, understanding that not every organization or every team can create those moments or those I don't know depths of despair, or however you want to look at them, you know. But so, what some guidance can you give to help create those things, especially at this time whenever people are so separated and may feel isolated?
Yeah, I think there is, I think to start personal, I don't know whether the right word is to say to start personal, but storytelling is a way to really help build relationships and relatability, just to get on the same page. And so I always start with storytelling all the time. I say, let's tell me a story where um, I've already used the kind of, you felt like you were doing your best work, or you felt like, really
Hmm.
successful. But, tell me a story of where you were working with someone that might have been really challenging, and like, what was that experience for you? How did you overcome that? What was that relationship like? And so when you start having those storytelling sessions, people start to go, "Oh yeah, I've been through that too," or, "Oh, I was through that, but I did something else. Like, have you
Hmm.
tried this?" So storytelling is a really great way just to open the dialogue,
Hmm.
initially, and you're not forcing people to see eye to eye. You're not forcing people to say, like, "Come together, let's all have a shared purpose." It's just very organic, right? And you start that dialogue and that transfer of kind of knowledge sharing, and I think that's a really good way to start building those connections, because you truly understand that we are completely different people, different walks of life, different experiences. But at our core, we go through things, we struggle, we come out the other end better. And so, yeah, just that relatability is where I would always start in building allyship.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is great, and I'm kind of smiling as you're talking because as you're asking the question, I'm visualizing the relationships that sort of I've built over time, and the ones where I initially started to struggle, where
Mm,
I've moved to a point of the other side of the fence, if you want, in a sense where it becomes a real appreciation of that relationship because of the journey to get to that point. It's so important to really work through a lot of those things. And having that shared purpose or something that brings people together is really a way to get over some of those concerns or challenges.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know we're up at almost on time, but I just want to touch on, because we've sort of went through leadership, empathy, shared purpose. We're talking about allies. Organizations are really front of mind is productivity. Is there other things that we need to be focusing on to sort of get to that productivity rather than the output? If we focus about the various inputs, do you think that would help achieve that greater output?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. In part of the discussion last week, which not everyone could hear, one of the things that we spoke about was some of this like new keyboard stroke monitoring software
Right.
and things like that. And I think that's where we need to move away from. And that's exactly where this conversation is going. Like, let's stop focusing on the keystrokes. Let's stop focusing on like we just need to be productive or we just need the billable hours. Let's just make that happen, and focus on what it takes to bring clients in. Right? What does that look like? What it takes to have build really trusting relationships, or where your clients start to think like, oh yeah, I can reach out to Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's always going to be there. He's always going to pick up the phone for me. So again, it's that human component. You can't get away from it. You can't escape it, and it's in the research. It's in the data as well. So it's yeah, I feel like I can't emphasize it enough, but there is a lot of information out there that really shows that if you just place the emphasis on the relationships within the workplace, on understanding, you do this particular part of the process, I might do this part of the process, but there are some things that I might do that might impact yours. Let's
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation. Let's build that relationship. Because it's not only a relationship now, it is a better understanding of what you're doing. And yeah, I mean, I feel like ultimately that leads to innovation, the ability to knowledge share and all of that. But yeah, focusing on what people actually do, what their experience is at work, how to create that environment, that right environment that Simon was speaking about, where people feel valued. People want to work hard. People want to figure out how they can cut the time from an hour to half an hour, right? People want to stay late to make sure that it's right. People want to review other people's presentations, even though it's not part of their job, because I just really like my mate, and he's a great guy or she's a great girl, that type of thing. I want her to be successful, so I'm going to help her out. Yeah, that's my takeaway.
No, and I didn't want to interrupt you. You said so many things. There's so many questions I have. Unfortunately, our time is up. But it was a great way to finish. No, 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 because it's for those who are watching. We do have a Discord channel. There's a link below. Come out to there. Reach out to Christina on there and share your thoughts. Ask Christina questions, and she will follow up. We've also put a link to Christina's company page and also to her LinkedIn profile. Do reach out. Do connect with her. And as you can tell, Christine is very open, very transparent, and will actually, who knows, maybe even post a video as a response to you on LinkedIn. But anyway, we'll just keep
Yeah, I
playing with
love
that.
that.
There we go, Christina. Look, as always, it's great chatting with you, and I'm glad we got to do this properly this time. You and I enjoyed the conversation last week. No one else got
Oh
to
yeah.
enjoy it, but anyway, no, I want to thank you. Thank you for giving your time. Thank you for all you're doing with Open Source Workplace, and yeah, have a great week.
Thanks, you too. Thanks
Cheers.
everyone for
Thank you,
listening.
everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Take care. Bye.